Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well in these tough times. Today, we're going to be talking about an asset class that has assets over $100 trillion under management and forms the dominant part in most portfolios, be it pension funds, endowments, sovereign wealth funds, institutionals, or ultra HNIs. I'm sure you would have guessed it by now. I'm talking about fixed income. And it is seemingly more important to discuss it given the multi-decadal low real interest rate scenario that we are in. To discuss this, we have with us one of the most versatile fixed income CIOs, Ms. Lakshmi Iyer. She needs no introduction, but for the benefit of our investors, she is the CIO Debt and Head of Products at Kotak Mahindra Asset Management Company. She has been associated with Kotak since 1999 and has played various roles from handling research to designing products to assisting a lot of ultra HNIs as far as the portfolios are concerned. Thanks, Lakshmi, for joining in. I hope you're doing well and taking out time for talking to our investors.
Hi, Megha. Thanks a lot for having me over.
Lakshmi, my first question to you is about fixed income in general. While I was reading the annual letter from Warren Buffett, there was a very interesting statement which said that bonds are not the place to be in, and fixed income investors have a bleak future going forward. What do you make of this statement?
So, my first observation on that point is that everything is uncertain, whether it is future, whether it is life, whether it is bond markets. So, I don't think there is any exception to that. So, I would say the way there is this classic tagline of an ad which says "हर एक friend जरूरी होता है." I would say हर एक asset class जरूरी होता है. So, it's extremely important to have the right proportion of everything in your portfolio. And to that extent, if I just take two asset classes and say fixed income and equities, because these are the two prominent financial asset classes, fixed income is like lemon water. It's lime water. You can have it in all seasons, whether it's winter, whether it's summer, whether it depends on whether you have it warm, lukewarm, cold, etc., depending on the seasons. Whereas equities is more like Red Bull. They are doses of caffeine to your portfolio. So there is no doubt in my mind that irrespective of what season we are as far as the interest rate cycle is, owning fixed income in your portfolio is inevitable.
Right, I think that's wonderfully explained. So, Lakshmi, my next question to you is that, as we speak, we have close to about $18 trillion dollars of negative yielding debt. And this is something, which I'm sure has a repercussion not only as far as bond market is concerned, but also in the valuation and pricing of other asset classes. Now, while at least I remember doing all my MBAs and CFAs, I have never heard about or never knew, I don't know how to interpret what does negative yielding debt means and if it is sustainable at all. So, in your view, is it sustainable? And second, if yes, what could be the valuation impact on other asset classes of this negative yielding debt?
Nothing in life is permanent. So even this will pass. The answer is yes. Why it occurred? Quick 1 minute on that. Because the world currently, even as we speak, is on steroids. So if there is, picture a malnourished person. So person is malnourished. There is so much of weakness in the body. You actually need to pump in proteins, vitamins, steroids, depending on the degree of the malnourishment, to ensure that he or she becomes able and healthy. Likewise, in that same analogy, the world health was obviously getting impacted because of the pandemic, and there was a clear need to pump in vitamin M or money into the system. As you pumped in vitamin M, there was so much of sloshing around of this vitamin, and you will understand and appreciate that even excess vitamins in the body shows itself negatively, and that's exactly what has happened. So the world economy, especially the parts of the developed world, actually got sloshed in this vitamin M, so much so that people kept pulling, or investors kept pulling these yields down, 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 to an extent that they were willing to pay something to own the investment. Usually, if you invest, you get some yield or coupon or rate of interest. So when yields actually go negative, you're not getting anything. Negative means you're losing. You're not getting anything. So that, in a nutshell, is what has happened so far. And as I said, can it continue to remain like this? We have seen instances in the past. This is getting a little bit prolonged. Because the degree of malnourishment in the health of various economies are varying. India has obviously positive real rates even as we speak right now, but developed world, the percentage of negative yield is coming down. It will take a while before it completely vanishes off, but yes, it will get to there. What does it mean when the world goes negative yields or parts of the world? The incentive to save in financial asset class tends to come down. People will say, oh, this bond is not giving me anything. In fact, I have to give to own it. So let me do one thing. Let me keep the monies in my pillows, in my tijoris, or wherever I'm keeping, or let me start buying physical asset class. That's not a very happy situation to be in. And therefore, as economies start progressing, you will start seeing this impact reduce, but definitely it's going to happen, but gradually.
Right. You very rightly pointed out that, we have been on steroids. And even if we look at what RBIs or central banks across the world have been doing, the idea has been to keep the yield curve to a desired level. If we look at our own RBI, things or initiatives like GSAP, Operation Twist, TLTRO, things we had never heard of in the past have been resorted to. Now, the most of us have been taught that yield curve is basically a function of macroeconomic parameters, economic growth, government borrowing, so on and so forth. We have also been told that, never fight the Fed. What implications, in your view, can these tools have in the long run for Indian economy in general?
See, any form of steroids, you call it by whatever name, GSAP, you mentioned a lot of these names, VRR, and all of these. I'm not, confusing the viewers or the listeners with too much of jargons, but please understand that this is India's version of pumping in steroids in the monetary system. Again, the impact of steroids is to cure a particular ailment, and here the ailment is the demand for government bonds in the system is very limited, whereas the supply continues to remain pretty static or marginally increasing, given that we have not taken any breather as far as controlling the fiscal deficit for this year is concerned. So the government is of the view that this year, being a year the next year after the main pandemic year, it's okay to go a little bit safe than sorry. Now, in that kind of a scenario, it is to the credit of the monetary authorities like the central bank, which is RBI in India, which have stepped in to ensure that they actually do a tightrope walk. And at the same time, while they are lending their balance sheet, please understand when Reserve Bank of India comes in to buy bonds, they are actually lending their balance sheet. But they have to be mindful that they do not lose the balance. Now, why I say that is because if this continues unchecked, and I'm sure that the monetary authorities will be mindful, there could be a tendency that with a lag, this can prove to be inflationary in an economy. So far, of course, nothing really to suggest that because growth forecasts are very modest. Probably, if this pandemic continues unchecked for a couple of months more, then it could potentially impact growth also on the lower side. So there's too many uncertainties. So right now maybe is not the time to worry about the after effects of the steroids, but it's very important to pump in the steroids to save that system. So I would say that yes, we need to be mindful of what is happening around and accordingly plan investments. But it's too soon to worry about the potential impact like today, tomorrow. And I'm confident that the central bankers are observing. Almost a 360-degree view. They can't take a very horse blinded or 180-degree view at the moment.
So, Lakshmi, what about a very important point as far as inflationary pressures are concerned? Now, there are two schools of thought as far as inflation is concerned. If you look at the US stimulus, till now at least, it has been more revenue expenditure oriented. Uh, We also understand that the multiplier effect that this kind of expenditure has is more short lived in nature, and the inflation it also brings about could be less sticky, short term in nature. Now, if we also see the talks that are going on, they're talking about capital expenditure. Uh, Going forward now, with commodity prices increasing, demand coming back, do you think that inflation, which has been almost non-existent for large part of years, could come back? Which camp would you be in?
Right now, if you, I don't know how many of you would have heard about this story of the boy who cried wolf. So the boy is nothing but the market participants, the wolf is the inflation, and the villagers right now are the monetary authority makers. So the boy or the markets are crying wolf, saying that, oh, there is going to be inflation. And as you rightly alluded to, the expenditure is all towards the revenue side because it's all quick fix. But you tell me what was or what is a better alternative, which today every monetary policy or economic policy maker across the globe is being grappled with. The problem is now on hand is to resolve for a crisis, and that too a health crisis. Mind you, it's not a financial crisis like what happened in the Lehman collapse in 2008, which finds its way, originates in the financial markets and culminates in the financial market. This has been a financial response to a medical emergency. So therefore, focusing on capital expenditure, etc., when nobody is expending, is a little bit far fetched at the current juncture. So therefore, yes, inflation could come back with a lag if there is not sufficient ramp up in production capacities, etc., to actually satiate, a demand which the globe, will start feeding into with a lag. But as I said, I would maintain that all it, a broken clock shows time twice right. So it's very nice and fashionable to talk about inflation, because invariably inflation will come, and then you can say, oh, you know what, I said so. So I'm not of that camp right now. Yes, we need to be mindful of inflation, which is why world over, including India, the tendency to ease rates further, to my mind, is extremely limited. Because when you ease rates substantively, you stoke in a huge amount of demand. Imagine if everybody were to get home loans at 5% in India. Right now, it's what, 6.5 to 7%. So even if your affordability is not very high, because the rate of interest you pay is less, the demand factor just shoots up. So one needs to be mindful, and I keep using the word tightrope walk. So you have to do that as a policy maker, and that's extremely important. So be mindful of inflation, yes, but don't go for the overkill, like the boy who kept crying wolf. And when the wolf actually came, the villagers were not there.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for a very detailed response. And we are seeing some changes also because Indian government in the last union budget announced certain measures on capital expenditure. So we hope there is a tightrope balance which you are mentioning would be maintained, and it'll be a win-win for the population in general and the government and the regulator. So regulator means the central bank here. So Lakshmi, my next question is about understanding the depth of Indian bond market. Now, if we see for last decade or so, there have been some improvements in bond market in India, but still we feel Indian bond market to be very, very shallow, be it in terms of liquidity, be it in terms of lower graded papers being traded. And then we have had issues like ILFS, DHFLZ, ADAG, Franklin Templeton, and all those things, which have even led to a situation where, be it investors or be it certain mutual fund houses, they have become extremely conservative. So today, when we speak to investors, they want only AAA or quasi-government bonds. When we speak to fund managers, they are also tilting their portfolio toward very, very safe papers. Do you think this kind of a situation can ever lead to a situation in India where the depth of bond market can improve? Do you see the trend changing over a period of time, or you still think that we are taking one step ahead and two steps back?
So Harsh, I am by birth be positive, apart from being an eternal optimist. So yes, my hopes keep lingering on. When I joined the bond markets into a couple of years, the color and the texture of the questions were pretty similar. And now 2 decades plus, the questions don't really change. But I must say that there are a couple of things which are right now of concern. One is, there is this phrase or a proverb which says once bitten, twice shy. So that feeling is so overwhelming in some of the investors' minds, which is probably stopping them from going into non-AAA bonds, but they could be of high pedigree. So somewhere that rating is playing a critical role. But here I would urge all the investors to actually have a Gajni mindset. And what is Gajni mindset? In this movie Gajni, if you actually see that male protagonist Amir Khan actually had a short-term memory loss. So I urge all investors not to really paint the canvas with the same brush just because all of you have been given a brush. Don't paint it with the same thing. So it's very important that it takes two to tango. So you need to have investors coming in, you need to have issuers coming in to issue bonds to ensure that the depth is maintained. Currently, the situation is such that bulk of the requirements for corporate India, and I'm not talking about the ones who have very big borrowing programs, they tend to get satiated by bank, activity or bank loans. So therefore, the secondary market or the capital market activity is not very vibrant. However, I must confess and add that the liquidity, we run mutual funds schemes, which not necessarily invest always in 100% AAA. But I must add and say, acknowledge that out of personal experience, liquidity, even when it comes to non-AAA bonds of high pedigree, has not been a challenge. So I think we've come a long way. We've covered good ground from where we were maybe about a decade and a half back to where we are right now. Can we get better? Answer is definitely yes. Ye dil mange more. But I think liquidating a portfolio of maybe, even if you're running, say, anywhere between 500 to 700 million dollars portfolio, which is anywhere around 3.5, 4,000 crores on individual fund houses. So even creating liquidity, even for those big size portfolios, having non-AAA assets, at least we've not really seen that to be a challenge. And I'm talking out of examples. So these are based on live experiences that we have been faced with in the past.
That's very true, Lakshmi. And we have seen, you honoring liquidity from mutual fund point of view, even if the liquidity of the underlying papers or the maturity of the underlying papers or the duration was relatively higher, but you have been ensuring liquidity on a T+1 basis, which is commendable and which gives a lot of trust to the investors when they are putting in money with all the mutual fund houses. So Lakshmi, my next question is about investment approach at this point of time. In your last few conference calls, you have been talking about dislocation in the yield curve. And the problem is it's very technical in nature for our clients to understand the entire yield curve and how it is dislocated. But in layman terms, if you have to explain to somebody that which duration one should look at this point of time, what credit rating one should look at this point of time, and whether one should be looking fixed income also in a way one would look at equity in terms of diversification of the portfolio. Though I understand that the answer would vary depending on the profile of the individual, but if you could give a general answer in terms of individual investors understanding how to play on the fixed income at this point of time, that would really help.
Sure. So, I am a foodie apart from being a filmie, so not too many film examples because obviously the shutters are down as far as multiplexes are concerned. So if I give you a food analogy, and this will really hit the chord, is one of the Italian dishes I love is lasagna. Now, the thing is that I know pretty much what are the ingredients that go behind making of that. But if you actually ask me to get in and try to do each and everything with the sequencing, I will muff it up big time, though I can understand the texture, taste, etc. And why I took this example is not to entice you into a lasagna session, but just to tell you that the fixed income yield curve is also exactly like that right now. It is, history or textbooks and these schools have taught us that if you are at the very short end, you're buying like very 2 months, 3 months, 6 months kind of bonds, then the yields usually are on the lower side. And the longer you go, usually you start getting higher yields. So that is something called in technical terms a slope, the upward sloping yield curve. Now, in our lasagna example, as is the yield curve, it's not necessarily happening in that same manner, which is why as portfolio managers, we keep trying to identify opportunities, whichever can possibly offer the better value for the buck. So in today's market scenario where we know that the market is continuing to have vitamin M or liquidity, the steroids in the system continue, and we know that there is a mammoth government borrowing program which they have to consummate through the next 11 months, we believe that there is a 1 to 5 year segment, which is the reasonably, I would say, the beautiful spot. And why we say sweet spot or the beautiful spot, because the tendency of the government of India to keep borrowing in that segment, or to keep pumping in supply in that segment, could be very limited. The liquidity factor allows this end of the curve to remain in happy space. Small volatilities is okay. So I think a zor ka jhatka dheere se category would be this broadly the 1 to 5 year segment, which is where we as money managers incrementally are focusing on in terms of building the entire portfolio.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. That really helps. Lakshmi, the next question is something which a lot of investors ask us time to time. That is a single issuer versus a mutual fund. There are newspaper advertisement, indicating that higher return, promising return, and those kind of things. And investor had bad taste in that category also in last few years. But still, there is a genuine interest in the minds of investors to look at that category versus a mutual fund. So, how would you advise those investors who are looking at NCDs versus a mutual fund route? Though we believe in the second camp, where we feel let it lie with the expert to decide where to invest and how to invest, but still there are queries which keep coming, and whenever there is a default by any issuer, we see a lot of retail participant being the victim of that. So what would be your comment on that, and how would you guide our investors to avoid that mistake?
Two thoughts come upfront to mind, on this query. One is, follow exactly opposite behavior that you would do in a COVID protocol period. So what does COVID protocol say? Mask yourself, don't go in groups, try to be alone, keep your distance. All that is the COVID appropriate behavior. Now, what is an investment appropriate behavior? Try to be in clusters, have a diversified portfolio, don't be alone, don't have single security concentration. And which is why I said contra behavior is absolutely important and necessary. And why this diversification is important is, again, following the principle of zor ka jhatka dheere se, in case an interest rate view goes wrong, or in case it's a credit investment goes wrong, you at least have, because of diversification, the shock absorbing capacity of that portfolio enhances manifold, which I think is extremely important. Second thought, again, which comes to mind is that it's not bad to own individual NCDs, but only if you are a reasonable PhD, or you have a PhD kind of a person who has guided you enough, because there are, apart from the credit and the interest rate risks associated with this, there is a great deal of liquidity risk which one has to settle in for when you go in for these individual security NCDs. So there is no one size fits all. If it makes sense for you, if your advisor is comfortable with underlying credit, because you may be a doctor, a lawyer, an entrepreneur, you don't have time to go through the cash flows of each of these instruments. So I think please be aware, you can use them sparingly, use them like salt, or use them like a little bit of dash of lime in your portfolio. Don't try to populate too much of that. Imagine eating a salty diet. Even if you don't have BP, you'll end up getting one.
That was really a very good analogy, and I think it'll remain with us for a very long period because it's easy to remember and it's easy to implement. Thank you for that. Lakshmi, my next question is generally for equity fund managers, but now with the changes happening in Indian landscape, that becomes relevant for you also. We have seen a lot of passive funds being launched in fixed income space, and you being the CIO of funds where you have consistently outperformed passive funds or index over a longer period of time. So two questions for me. One, should I be allocating to passive funds? If yes, what should be the ratio I should be looking between active and passive in fixed income?
Right now, passive funds are telling active funds, like in the movie Gully Boy, they are saying apna time aayega. And active funds are telling passive funds, dekhiye zara kisme kitna hai dum. So, that is the classic tug of war going on. But to our minds, as a portfolio manager, it is never a tug of war. I think, there is absolutely enough and more space for both these strategies to coexist in your portfolio. It is not that you take passive and you weed out active, because markets have anomalies, markets have asymmetric flow of information globally and in India. And for that, uh, the agility of an active manager is absolutely essential. But because you want to de-risk, given the interest rate scenario, you don't want to really have all your eggs into active management. Complementing your active strategy with a passive is what I would say is a good or a prudent way to plan your investments going forward. So therefore, if you have the if active funds are your dosa, there is a masala dosa which has this small ingredient of the potato in it. So have it like that. It enhances the taste, it enhances the value. But be mindful that ultimately potatoes are carbs. So populating it too much of it, and spreading it too much into it, obviously can dislocate your own portfolio balancing. So complementing strategies definitely work. And keep in mind that even the passive strategies are vulnerable to interest rate movements in the near term. Of course, over time, when you live through the duration of that particular portfolio, whether it is active or passive, the rewards can be much, much more stabilized.
That really helps, Lakshmi. Lakshmi, my last question, and this is not about fixed income, and this is about concept of economics. And this concept has been, in the media, for last 4 or 5 years, especially in last 1 to 2 years, in a big way. A lot of people are talking about it, but a lot of us don't understand, including us, including our investors. So, if you could help us understand this concept of modern monetary theory in layman terms, and because it's very rare that we see a concept of economics becoming so prominent in a very short period of time. So, as a last question, if you could give some idea on what this is and what role it has to play in the world economics today.
No, see, put it very simply, what does MMT, or, for travelers like me, MMT is like make my trip. But obviously, because I track economics, and now the traveler in me has obviously taken a backseat. So right now, MMT, we are talking about modern money theory. It simply talks about, world over, governments are using this opportunity, to create money using fiscal tools. So that is what it is trying to say. And that probably, right now, if you see the entire economy, I mean, our flights running at full capacity, answer is no. Our restaurants open, answer is no. So the economy is not running at full potential right now. So what modern money theory effectively tries to say is that once you actually reach that, I call it the Gautam Buddha stage, or the Nirvana stage of full productivity, employment, etc. That is when inflation, etc. starts picking up. You can use that to probably do reducing taxes, etc. In the entire system. So that is in a nutshell what MMT tries to advocate. My small 2 bits on this is that as an investor, it is great to have domain knowledge and I would say academic interest track all of this. I don't invest in bitcoins, but I do track a lot of bitcoins. I did track the Coinbase IPO, etc. But to try to be governed by all of this in your day-to-day investment decision making, my view is please refrain from that. So it is a great weekend read. I have a lot of articles, etc. Probably I can share also for the benefit of the audience. Probably up your knowledge quotient, but for your IQ or your investment quotient, you should be confident that your advisors or your money managers probably will do that for you pretty effortlessly, because that's what their full-time profession is.
That's so true. And again, going back to the food example, too many cooks spoil the broth. So that makes a lot of sense for us to take only that information which is relevant. Lakshmi, this brings us to the end of our conversation, and it's been really enriching conversation from multiple points of view. So not only you explained the concepts of fixed income in detail, but you explained those with examples which are very easy to recollect and remember, and that really helps all of us in our learning curve and our understanding curve. a few key takeaways for me to understand from our discussion. One, and the most important punchline about fixed income, at हर एक asset जरूरी होता है. So be it about gold, be it about Bitcoin, be it about real estate, equities, one should have a mix and a balance of everything. Second example, which was very interesting, is that fixed income is like a lime water and equities is like Red Bull. And these days, equities has become even more volatile and more energy inducing than even Red Bull. Example of vitamin M and how excessive usage of vitamins or excessive intake of vitamins can be harmful at times is very well understood. And I think it makes a lot of sense for us to relate it to the supply of money which is there in the world. Lastly, and most interesting example, which is very relevant in today's time, which you gave, was about investment behavior should be opposite of COVID behavior. So in investment, we should all be not looking at isolating ourselves, but we should be a part of group. We should be diversifying ourselves. And that really helps us in terms of understanding how our investment portfolio should look like. Lastly, to take a point from you, in these times when everyone is surrounded by so many bad news and everyone is too stressed out, one or two words which I would take away from you, not only for this discussion but in general, is be positive. So we would try to be positive, and we will try to make our clients also positive about markets, portfolios, and everything. Thank you so much for taking out time. Thank you so much for your interesting answers, and we are sure this will help our investors in a big way. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And all of you stay safe and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshmi.